Let's get across the market over now. Jimmy Jang joining us from GBA Capital. Jimmy, welcome to Tuesday. Now, take a look at what happened overnight. Now, US and UK markets closed, although futures on Wall Street are up significantly. We saw European shares rise, all over optimism that a deal is close to end the war in the Middle East.
Good morning. Yeah, I think it's a great morning to kind of wake up to. I think this is what the investors were hoping for a while, but I think it is definitely getting closer. Probably than ever that we'll see this war come to an end quite soon. It's kind of reflected in the prices, Andrew. So we've seen the oil price kind of falling very sharply, and like you mentioned, the futures closing very high, and the investors are definitely rotating back into that growth and cyclical sectors. So that's definitely something that we've seen quite active in the US market and the global market, and hopefully that will probably flow down to the ASX when we open very soon, which is excellent. So the reason why this is so important, and it kind of shows in the currency level as well. We saw the US dollar weakening, which is very good from the equity perspective. The Australian dollar kind of stretching towards that US 71 cents, which obviously is something that we've been kind of waiting on all at the same time. So in terms of segment wise, we're seeing a very strong performance, or expect a very strong open with the ASX, and hopefully a lot of the precious metals, especially gold stock that's been under water for a while, should see a very strong bounce today. So something to look forward to this morning.
Jimmy, of course, the Australian market has lagged, particularly Wall Street, significantly. If we do get a resolution in the Middle East, are you expecting it's going to play catch up or not?
If I'm being completely honest, Andrew, I don't think we'll catch up to the level of growth that the US index has seen since the Iran war erupted. And that's largely because although the war might come to an end and oil price might stabilize, but at the same time, a lot of these high energy prices that did push since the war erupted will probably put a lot of pressure with the inflation, and obviously what the central banks, especially in Australia, perhaps may do over the next 2 more quarters. And because we're so reliant on commodities, we probably must see some bit more higher pressure with the energy price for the productions for a lot of these gold miners and mining companies overall. So we must see a lot of strong recovery in a short term, but to capture to the level of the growth that we see in the US, I'm not too sure. But hopefully that will be the case following. But we are seeing some strong performance in a lot of the lithium sector. So maybe sector-wise, we must see a lot of outperformance, but overall, this is probably one of the a market where we really need to pick the right commodity to see that kind of growth rather than just the broad.
Now, Jimmy, you mentioned lithium. News from MinRes with its Chinese joint venture partner approving a $490 million expansion of its Mount Marion operation in WA.
Yeah, and I think a key takeaway with this transaction was the confidence. And so Jiangxi Guangfeng and Lithium JV partner, like you mentioned, has approved that major $490 million expansion at their Mount Marion lithium project in the WA. What's really important for the investors to kind of note on is that this is not the early stage speculation. So it's a producing asset where the management is deploying some serious capital because they see a long-term value and kind of economics improving from here. So the market's definitely focusing heavily on the fact that the project is expected to pay back in less than 1 year at current prices, and that's an exceptionally fast payback period for a mining expansion. So that's something that we probably will see a very high opening this morning. And what they're really building is two major components. So the first is that new flotation plant costing around $240 million to designed to improve the recoveries towards about 70% and upgrade the operation into a higher quality SC5 spodumene product. And second level, around $220 million will go towards the underground mine development, which will allow MinRes to access deeper and higher grade ore. So, very well scattered, and something that the market's been eyeing for. So it is a higher grade concentrate, typically attract a lot of stronger pricing, and will probably materially improve their economics in general. So it will be a very strong news to kind of wake up to this morning.
And Jimmy, elsewhere, Evian Group. Now, well, that's in graphite, but it's making an expansion of the US with critical minerals.
Yeah, just like what we mentioned earlier, with the lithium sector having a stronger demand, graphite is something that we cannot ignore. So it's not something that what we'll probably focus more on is their recent acquisition of the fluorspar project in Nevada called CAR. And yesterday we saw a very strong announcement coming out from the company, basically announcing their independent verification of their surface sampling result or from what they got from the vendors. And the vendor is very reputable company. The Globex is listed in Canada, and so and some of the results that we saw, in terms of grade was very high by the industry standards. Close to 88.15%. Some of the asset result, calcium fluoride that we identified from the company. But before we kind of get into it, a lot of viewers might be not so familiar with fluorspar as a commodity. So the fluorspar is also categorized as a critical minerals in the US and EU and also in Australia. And what that basically does is it's a critical industrial mineral used to produce hydrofluoric acid, or more so HF. And that kind of is essential across a very huge number of strategic industries. So more relevantly recently, the lithium ion batteries, semiconductors, and the uranium conversion. So when the investors hear that critical minerals, this kind of generally qualifies a lot of the boxes that ticks them before investing. And with the very high grade sampling data that came from the vendor, which was now verified using the competent person reviews, the sampling methodology, laboratory procedures, and QA/QC protocols. In simple terms, the company is basically telling the market the data is technically very credible and defensible from what they saw from the vendor's perspective. So very strong announcement that we saw. We probably will see a very strong performance from the company for the rest of this week, and it's something that definitely should be watched very closely today, and also put on a watch list. And if there's a good buying opportunity, definitely put in your portfolio.